Welcome to Literary AF Podcast.
And we're back. Welcome to the Literary AF Podcast. My name is Sheldon.
I'm Danny.
And we're here today to talk about a little book you may not have heard about. It's pretty underground.
It's kind of obscure.
Called Pride and Prejudice by Our Lady Jane Austen.
Yes.
Just for a little background for you guys, Pride and Prejudice is a book, and it's pretty good.
Pretty good.
We both like it a lot.
A whole lot. I've read it like twice. I've listened to it like twice now.
And watched.
I've watched it for hundreds of hours.
Yeah.
No doubt about it.
It's a good book that's been turned into a lot of movies and miniseries and like adaptations and
stage.
Yep, spin-off books.
So many spin-off books.
It's a bit of a phenomenon. I don't know if you guys have heard of it.
200-year-old phenomenon.
Yeah, and it's it kind of like is where our interests meet because I'm all about classics and you're all about romance.
Yeah.
And this is like a classical romance.
It's a nice intersection, for sure.
Okay, so just to do a kind of general plot summary, Danny, you've recently listened to the audiobook, so...
Yeah, I just finished it like yesterday.
You take it away.
Okay, so the story opens in Longbourn. It follows the Bennet family. There is Mrs. Bennet and Mr. Bennet.
Mm-hmm.
Their eldest daughter, Jane.
Mm-hmm.
Their second daughter, Elizabeth.
True.
And then you've got Mary, Kitty, and Lydia, the youngest, at 15 years old.
All names that I will remember and not forget over this episode.
And they find out that one of the neighboring estates is going to be rented out to a man named Mr. Bingley, who I believe has £5,000 a year, and that makes him a very eligible bachelor. And
heck yeah.
It sort of follows, I guess, Jane and Elizabeth and Mr. Bingley and his friend Darcy, and like these complex relationships and social situations, and I guess it's a. Should I do like the whole
No, let's
thing?
just do like a briefer, like just a skim over the plot. Like, so then they want to get married. They go to they go to a ball, right?
Yeah, there's the ball, and that's where Mr. Bingley and Mr. Darcy and Mr. Bingley's sisters all get introduced.
Yeah.
And Mr. Bingley is like instantly puppy dog eyes at Jane, because Jane is known as like the beautiful girl in the
Jane's
neighborhood.
the smoke show of the family.
Yeah, for sure.
And
Lizzie's the brains of the family.
Well, she's like sassy.
She's like also aside from Mary, who's like too far into the bookish realm, Lizzie's like her daughter's favorite, or her father's favorite, because she's the smart book sense daughter.
Yeah, she's also the best zombie fighter.
She's also the best zombie fighter. But
we're going to talk about that in the next episode with the spinoffs.
That's not, there's no zombies in Pride and Prejudice, unfortunately.
Okay, and then so they go to the
ball.
Yeah.
And Mr. Bingley's in love with Jane, like instantly. Everybody's like, oh, look at that. And then Mr. Darcy is overheard by Elizabeth saying that she's pretty enough, but she's not handsome enough to tempt me, which is like a huge diss, and she's super offended.
Yeah, Darcy's comes off at the beginning as kind of a jerk.
Yes, absolutely.
And that's the whole thing with him. And then so Elizabeth doesn't like Darcy.
No.
Jane really likes Bingley.
Yes.
The sisters don't like Jane.
No, Bingley's sisters don't like Jane, but they're like faux best friends with her.
Yeah.
They send her letters where they're talking about how much they like her and they're great friends or whatever, and then they like definitely two-face on her later. Yeah,
we can speed this up because I assume most people listening to this have already read it.
Yeah.
And if they haven't, they should go read it,
yes.
Or at least like watch one of the many adaptations and movies. So anyway, there's Bingley and Jane, and then they kind of don't get together. Darcy ends up, him and Elizabeth are fighting all the time, but then he ends up proposing to Elizabeth, which is like a big shock.
Yeah.
And then she finds out later that Darcy's actually a great guy and that she kind of missed her chance.
Yeah.
But then there's the whole thing with Wickham.
Yeah.
There's the whole thing with Mr. Collins.
We're going to get into all of that, I'm sure.
Probably, maybe.
Yeah.
And in the end, Pride beats Prejudice.
No?
Perfect summary. All right.
All right.
What are your kind of general thoughts about the book?
My general thoughts. Let's see. I really like it. It's definitely one of my favorites for sure. Mr. Darcy, I honestly love him a whole lot.
Yeah.
When I first read the book, I'm like, this guy's such a huge ass. Why would this book have a hero who's a huge dick? But like, the more you get to know him, you realize like he's shy and awkward, and he's actually a good guy.
Yeah. Yeah, I was moderately smitten by Darcy.
Oh yes.
The first time I read the book.
Absolutely. He's got that big, brooding, handsome thing going on, and he's super rich.
Well, no. He's mysterious and cool and dark and edgy, and that's what I like.
Let's see. Mr. Bingley, I also really liked.
Okay.
He's got like the excitable puppy dog thing going on, which is like cute. Whereas like Darcy's sexy, Bingley's cute. So they kind of counter each other there. Let's see.
What do you think about Wickham?
Wickham sucks.
Yeah, Wickham's the worst.
Wickham sucks pretty bad.
So, okay, we kind of skipped over Wickham in my excellent plot summary.
Yeah.
But the thing with Wickham is he's like a soldier and he's like flirting with Elizabeth.
Yes.
And you're kind of like, oh, maybe this is a nice match.
Yeah.
But then you find out that he was connected to Darcy. And what's the, yeah.
So, Mr. Wickham was the son of Darcy's father's steward, so
Okay.
they like grew up together and they knew each other. And Wickham was kind of like adopted by Mr. Darcy's father and was like raised as one of his sons and was taught and like just brought up in this super sophisticated environment. And then when Mr. Darcy's father died, he wrote in his will that Wickham was supposed to be given a sum of money and then a place to live. Going to the church and work from there. But instead of that, Mr. Wickham asked for more money and said he didn't want the house to live, which is actually what happened. But Mr. Wickham tells Elizabeth that just Darcy screwed him out of his inheritance.
Yeah. So then Elizabeth finds out that it's a lie from Darcy, and then, but at the same time, or shortly after, she finds out that her youngest sister
Lydia
has run off with Darcy.
Yes.
And yeah, it's kind of like it's the big kind of twist of the.
Yeah, it happens about halfway, just over halfway through the book.
Yeah.
So 65%.
It's yeah.
Yeah. Well, they run off together, and Lizzie learns that Mr. Wickham turns out is like a huge gambler, and he makes a bunch of debts, and everywhere he goes, he's got debt.
Yeah.
And his plan was actually to run away because he was in the regiment. He was just going to run away and try to make a break for it, and he didn't want to go alone, so he brought Lydia with him.
Yeah.
And he never actually intended on marrying Lydia.
No.
But by running away with her, he completely ruined her reputation.
Yeah, ruins her reputation, and then
by
shortly
association,
later,
it would ruin all of her sisters' reputations as well.
Sure. Yeah. And then shortly later, you find out that someone paid all of Darcy's, or not Darcy's debts, Wickham's debts, and Wickham did marry Lydia and saved the reputation.
Yes.
And then Elizabeth thinks it's the uncle, right?
Mr. Gardner, her mother's brother.
But then she finds out it was Mr. Darcy.
Yes.
Wow.
Mr. Darcy shows up later at the end of the book, and he's like, it wasn't for your family. I did it all for you. And it was very sweet. Very sweet.
Oh, man. And then what do you think about... we're going to go into characters more, right?
Yeah. Yeah, we have a whole favorite, least favorite character section coming up.
Okay, so then first let's go through like when you read it, what made you choose to read it.
Sure.
It's... I'm taking the lead here, even though you have the questions written down. So I'm just like hoping that I get them right.
You did, yeah. You're so far so good. Yeah.
Perfect.
I read the book when I was probably 14, 15 years old.
Okay.
I was in high school. I had seen it recommended on the internet before because I was probably just Googling romance novels. Mm-hmm. And I remember at the time, Twilight had just come out. It was just getting popular.
Oh, I've heard of Twilight, yes.
And Bella Swan has this whole thing where, like, classic lit's really cool. She super loves it.
Yes.
It's awesome. And that, like, really made me not want to read it. just because I have problems with that book.
Really?
Yeah.
That was like the one bit of credibility that, like, for me to not hate Twilight was I was like, oh, she likes classic literature and it's referenced in this book. It's actually a smart book.
She likes Pride and Prejudice and she likes Wuthering Heights, and I think that's like the only. There's maybe another one.
Isn't there one in every book that she references a lot?
I don't know, because I remember reading the first book, and there's a point where she just talks about how she likes the classics such as Pride and Prejudice and Wuthering Heights. And I know Wuthering Heights, I've never read it, and I'm not really interested in doing it.
I've read it.
I don't know, it doesn't seem like
it's good.
My kind of style, but...
Yeah, except you like it when they're happy and stuff.
Yes.
And I'm, no.
Yeah, I prefer my happy endings.
And I'm all about misery, so I kind of like it a little more.
And so yeah, Bella was like, oh, classic lit's great. I love Pride and Prejudice. And I was like just about to start reading it. I'm like, I don't know if I want to do this now because I'm not a huge fan of Twilight. But I did anyways, and I'm glad that I did.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely love Pride and Prejudice. I don't love Twilight.
I think I was like 23.
Okay.
I had just started a job where I was working overnight shifts.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a very easy job where there was nothing to do. And on my phone, or it was like an iPod Touch at the time,
Nice.
which dates myself a little bit. I had an app with like a free ebook reader.
Yeah.
And one of the free ebooks on it was Pride and Prejudice.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh, I'll read it.
All right.
It's a classic literature book. I'll read it.
Okay.
And at the beginning, I didn't like the book. I didn't get it. It was just like, oh, why do these people care about this? Or like, why are they like, why is the mom so like overbearing? And why are they being so annoying? And then I was like, by like chapter 4 or 5, it kind of like clicked in my head like, oh, this is a comedy. Yeah. It's supposed to be funny that the mom is overbearing. And it's like, the fact that they're caring about all these little details is like part of the humor. Yeah. And then you kind of get like Lizzie's sarcasm, and you kind of get like Mr. Bennet. And then Mr. Collins shows up, and you're like, oh, this guy is such a like arrogant buffoon. It's like, it is a comedy, it's a joke. Yeah. And then I was like kind of on board, and I was like, oh, it's funny, I get jokes, but I wasn't like into the romance at the start. Yeah. And then Darcy, the whole thing at Pemberley, Darcy's estate or whatever. Yeah. That whole section where it's like the little sister is like revealing how good a guy Darcy is. Yeah. I was like, oh, what is this like fluttering in my heart? And I was just like deeply on like
Elizabeth fell in love and so did you.
Kind of, but I related to Darcy a little more, and then so that when that part happened, I was just like it wasn't an ego boost for me because I'm obviously not Mr. Darcy, but just like
you could be.
It just like the character became so much more interesting to me, where he went like from being like, oh, he's kind of a jerk, to being like, oh, he's a secret nice guy.
So I remember the first time I ever read the book, I was super surprised when Darcy, who's supposed to be the hero, turned out to be like a not nice guy. Mm-hmm. And B, when like right in the middle of the book, he just turns around and proposes to Elizabeth. When she, like, doesn't like him, and he's done almost nothing nice to her at all, and he just turns around and says, I'm in love with you, even though your family sucks, even though you have no money, you know, against my better judgment, I'm in love with you.
Yeah, I love that part, and just, like, it's like, you can just tell that he doesn't quite understand Elizabeth yet, or like doesn't understand like I guess women in general yet. But yeah, that proposal was.
It mentions like how he looks like he knows she's gonna say yes, and it sends a couple lines where he just it says that he looks so confident and self-assured, like there's no possibility that she would ever turn him down, and then she does.
I think that's kind of why I like the BBC version of it, the miniseries with Colin Firth. Yeah. Because I feel like his face really captures that like shock of being rejected well. Like he's just like.
Although I do have a spot in my heart for the scene where they're in the rain in the garden in the 2005 movie.
Oh,
where they're like so close to kissing and they don't. Oh, it was good.
You and your romance. Nobody's miserable in that version. That's why I don't like it. Okay, so then we should talk about the characters a little bit.
Sure.
Who's your favorite character in the
My
book?
favorite character. Let's see. My favorite character is... this is going to be kind of cliche, but it's actually probably Mr. Darcy.
Oh, wow.
He manages to go from, like, this super huge pompous jerk and then eventually turns into, like, this really shy guy who... he just doesn't know how to talk to girls.
Yeah.
Or anybody, for that matter. And then when he does try to talk to a girl that he likes, he goes about it the way wrong way and insults her family and her and everybody that she likes. So, but in the end, he turns it around, and his goals have always been for the well-being of his friends and his younger sister. So,
Yeah.
he's actually a nice guy.
Yeah.
Spiky shell.
I'm a big fan of Mr. Bennett, the dad.
Yeah, Mr. Bennett.
The dad is very funny, and he seems like this interesting character who's trapped in this world with like 5 daughters and an overbearing wife, and he I don't know, he seems like he's happy, but at the same time he just like he's made the best of his situation, I guess. And like one of my favorite parts will always be when the mom tries to get him to swear off Elizabeth for not I think it's because she said no to Mr. Collins.
Yeah.
And then he's like, well, this puts us in a very interesting position because you will not talk to Elizabeth if she does not marry Mr. Collins, and I will not talk to her if she does marry Mr. Collins.
Yeah, that's good.
And it's just he's just like a fun character who's like on Elizabeth's side, and I really like him.
Yeah.
Which character is your least favorite?
Least favorite character I have underlined twice in this book. It is Mr. Collins.
What?
Yeah, absolutely.
He's so funny.
I actually was trying to think if they mention his first name at all in the book, but I don't think they do.
I don't remember.
But I don't know. He comes across as really stupid, but he's also a jerk about it at the same time.
Yeah, he's pompous and an idiot. It's perfect combination.
I don't know. It was grating. And like at the end of the book, where Lydia and Wickham, the news about what happened with them has gotten out, he sends Mr. Bennett a letter about how unfortunate the circumstances are and how the best thing would be to just completely cut her off. And after Lydia and Wickham are married, he sends another letter that's like, I can't believe you let them in your house. The best thing that you should have done, the most Christian thing you should have done, is given your blessing, never let them in the house, and then send them away.
Perfect.
Yeah.
That's why he's such a good character. No, he's a fool, and like he gives a good dose of comedy in the beginning half. And then he also offsets Catherine de Bourgh well because she's like a very mean person.
Yes.
And so to have like him kind of contrasted with this fool, it really works well. My least favorite, probably Lydia, the one who marries Wickham.
Yeah.
Because she's just like, I mean, she's a 15-year-old who acts like a 15-year-old.
Yeah, that's the
and that's
thing.
like, she has these like delusions of grandeur and like these like wild romantic ideas that are just like,
I don't know, because she's 15 though, and this like 20-something-year-old guy.
And teens are the worst.
Yes, but I can't blame her for what she does, because her mother encourages everything that she does. And
yeah,
then,
actually, as soon as you said the mother, I realized that the real villain of Pride and Prejudice is in fact the mom.
Mrs. Bennett.
Because she's always trying to force things, and like every time she gets involved, which is always
every time, yeah.
The only relationship she doesn't get involved with is Elizabeth and Darcy.
No. But even then, like,
but that's because she doesn't know.
She badmouths Darcy all the time.
Constantly. Yeah. She doesn't even know what's going on with them.
In front of Darcy, she badmouths Darcy.
Oh, I hate her.
Yeah.
The mom is the worst.
There you go.
How dare she go against Darcy?
New least favorite character, Mrs. Bennett.
Okay, and what's next on our question list?
Let's see. We've got... Should Charlotte Lucas have married Mr. Collins?
Oh, yeah. Okay, so this is a good question because Charlotte was good friends with Elizabeth.
She was, yeah. She was Elizabeth's best friend.
Mr. Collins...
proposed to Elizabeth.
I was going to say applied to Elizabeth first, like applied for marriage. Proposed to Elizabeth first, and Elizabeth says no, and then next thing she knows...
next day, basically. Yeah.
Her best friend is like, oh, hey, guess what, Elizabeth?
We're married. We're married.
So, yes. What do you think?
No, I feel bad for Charlotte because I hate Mr. Collins for one.
Yeah.
And Charlotte seemed like a nice person. She was Elizabeth's best friend, and she only married him because she was afraid that nobody would ever ask her to get married.
Yeah, that's kind of sad. I kind of feel like, I don't know, if she can put up with Mr. Collins' like buffoonery,
Yeah,
I think she would have a very nice life for herself back then.
that's kind of what they were saying.
And I don't know, I kind of feel like Elizabeth was never interested in Collins, so there's not
No.
like really a conflict of interest there
Yeah.
where, if somebody else had married Darcy, it would be like kill them, murder that person.
I like how in the book, it mentions that Charlotte encourages Mr. Collins to spend as much time like outside, away
That's right.
from her as possible.
Yeah.
And her room is on the opposite side of the house from Mr. Collins's room, so
Yeah.
that there's like little chance of him coming in to bug her. And I thought that was really funny.
So while we're talking about problematic couples in the book,
Yes,
what do you think about Lydia and Wickham?
that's actually the next one here. I feel bad for Lydia.
Mhm.
She was enabled by her mother, and she was easily swayed by a handsome older man in an army uniform
Mhm.
to run away and get married. She didn't really understand what she was doing to her family.
Didn't Elizabeth warn her?
No, that's part of the problem when Elizabeth is coming back, is she thinks I should have warned everybody about what Wickham was. And this is partially my fault because I didn't tell anybody.
Yeah, I can't remember. I feel like she warned Lydia in one of the other versions.
She talks to Jane about it, but Jane's the only one who knows.
Because I recently read one of the spin-off ones,
Okay.
like with the zombies,
Yes.
and I feel like in that one there's a part where she warns Lydia about.
She could have. It's been a while since I read that one.
But yeah, I don't remember well. Okay, well, how about? Oh wait, I didn't say what I thought about it.
Yeah, no, what's your opinion on this?
I mean, she's young and dumb,
Yeah.
and he's a jerk and
Yes.
preys on young and dumb.
Yes.
But how old is he supposed to be?
I think he's about Darcy's age, and Darcy's like 27.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's I'm gonna say probably mid to later 20s.
Yeah, if he's like 20 and she was 15, then I would say they're both young and dumb. But if he's like closer to 30
Yeah,
and she's 15,
I'm
then it's like,
pretty sure he's
dog.
supposed to be older than that, so for sure.
I don't know about that one, dog. How about? Oh, this one's not problematic. But what do you think about Bingley and Jane?
Bingley and Jane are good.
Yeah.
Bingley's got like the cute puppy dog thing going on, and Jane just wants everybody to be happy.
Yeah.
She sees the best in everybody all the time.
Jane is super sweet.
Yeah.
And she's incredibly hot.
Yes.
That's like her two descriptors in the
Yes.
book. And I always feel like I like Elizabeth more because she's like a bolder person and she's like more I don't know, but Jane is just like a sweetheart.
Yeah.
Like she's a cinnamon roll you want to take care of.
Yeah,
And,
well, they both are, Bingley and Jane. So they fit with each other pretty well.
Yeah. Well, while we're talking about them, we found a quote online by some 18th century critic or something.
Yeah.
And their whole argument was, why would Darcy ever choose Elizabeth over Jane?
Yes.
Because Jane is like perfect wife material.
Yeah.
She's super hot. She's super kind and loving and
Yeah.
caring
Yeah.
and would make an excellent wife back then.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're like, why would he ever choose Elizabeth when he could have potentially had Jane?
The hot one, yeah.
Yeah. And what do you think? Did he make the right choice with Elizabeth?
Yes. Because for Bingley, the most important thing is caring for his friends and his family. And Mr. Bingley was in love with Jane from basically the moment that he saw her. So if Darcy decided he wanted Jane, he would be taking her away from his best friend. That's not a very nice thing to do. And he looks out for Bingley throughout the entirety of the book. That's like one of his primary focuses. That's why it takes Bingley away from Netherfield Park in the first place, because he worries he's going to get into a bad spot. So trying to steal his girl would be a pretty crappy thing to do.
But I mean, isn't there a while where Bingley and Jane are like they've broken it off and they both kind of moved on for a little bit?
Neither of them move on, and that's kind of like a thing that Jane she pretends she's not sad anymore.
Yeah.
But nobody talks about Bingley around her anymore. And
Okay, well then forget the Bingley issue. What if it was just Darcy coming and he had the choice of Elizabeth and Jane.
Then that's a bit more difficult.
Really?
Yeah.
I'd still go with Elizabeth.
I would say Elizabeth, yeah, but Jane would definitely make a better wife for Darcy, I'm sure.
I don't know. Well, I mean, Jane's a babe, but like, there's something about the banter back and forth
Yeah.
between Elizabeth and Darcy that's so like perfect.
Absolutely.
And like,
that's a great part of it for sure.
we talked more about how he was like kind of shy and awkward, but he's also like he's witty and like he has these like clever comebacks, and she's like Jane like gives it well. Like she's not like a simple like Victorian woman who's like afraid to speak or
You mean
whatever.
Elizabeth?
I can't remember who I said,
You
but
said Jane.
whatever. One of them is
Yeah.
good.
Yeah. I feel like Darcy would get bored of Jane really quickly.
Yeah.
And there's like in the final chapter of the book where it does like an epilogue of sorts. It talks about how Elizabeth and Darcy have this back and forth between them throughout the entirety of their marriage.
Mm-hmm.
And Georgiana lives with them when she's growing up, and she's like super confused because Elizabeth is talking to Darcy in ways that a wife's not supposed to talk to her husband.
Yeah.
And Elizabeth is like, "Oh no, trust me, it's fine," which I thought was really sweet.
Okay, so then our last question we have on our list, and it's good because we're almost out of time.
Yep.
Do you think this translates well to a modern audience?
Yes.
This book is, what, 200 years old now?
Like 190.
Wasn't it written like 1805?
I guess it's
Be like 210.
2019, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. I forgot what year it was.
Yeah, it's time is moving too fast. It's not fair.
Yes.
But yeah, so it's like over 2 centuries old now.
Yes.
Do you think there's value for people who are like...
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay.
Absolutely, yeah. There's been multiple adaptations, even today, of Pride and Prejudice. People are taking the plot and they're writing it in their own way.
Yeah.
I know there's 3 different books coming out between last year and this year alone that have critical acclaim already that are like reworks of Pride and Prejudice. And they have different themes, people from different backgrounds, ethnicities, stuff like that. And people are still reading them. They're still selling. People are still writing them. So I think it translates really well.
Yeah, I think there's something like... I don't like using the word universal because, like, you know, nothing applies to everybody out there, but there's something that's, like, near universal about this book where it's like a love story that you can get into if you're, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's like a clever love story. And it's like, so if you're like a jaded old man who reads too much classic literature, like, you'll like it.
Yeah.
And if you're like a younger and more positive and optimistic girl who reads romances, you'll enjoy it too. But yeah, I would say if you've never read it, like, check out one of the movies.
Mm-hmm. The 2005 adaptation, it's an hour and a half long.
That's the Keira Knightley one, right?
Yes, it is. It's good.
It's pretty good, yep.
If you want to get into it a little more, the BBC series is 6 episodes long at 45 minutes an episode. That's my favorite one. Colin Firth as Mr. Darcy
is my favorite
cannot be beat.
Colin Firth is amazing in that.
Yeah. He dives into a lake in a white shirt. It's amazing.
I don't remember that part of it.
Oh, it's so good.
But I remember it being a good miniseries.
For sure. The best one, for sure.
There's other versions. We'll talk about the spin-offs and stuff next time. But, I mean, there's a lot of different versions of Pride and Prejudice you could read. I don't think... Like, the language is older, so some people might have a bit of trouble getting to it at first.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's particularly, like, hard to work through. Like, it's not like Shakespeare.
No. If you have, like, you can Google some terms are outdated, you might not know what they are,
Yeah.
you just throw them into your phone, it'll tell you. Grammar can be a little weird, like the 4 and 20 families.
Yeah.
Can get kind of confusing sometimes, but...
And I find, too, like, as long as you realize that it's a comedy, that, like, these things are supposed to be funny, they're supposed to be silly, and you're not supposed to be taking them too seriously, especially at the start, like, then it becomes a much more enjoyable read. And, like, that was the hardest thing is, like, because it's older language, so at first it's kind of like you tend to read it in the way that you would read like a King James Bible or something, like something that or like Shakespeare with like gravitas, but no, Shakespeare's funny too. You just have to like be able to parse through the language and realize the like wit and stuff like that. But yeah, that's our 30-minute recommendation to read Pride and Prejudice. If you are a big fan of listening to book podcasts but haven't read one of the most famous books of all time,
you might want to dig into it.
Yeah, it's a good one to check out.
It's worth a read. The audiobook is only 11 hours, so you can like sit through a work day or two and knock it out. No problem if you have a job that lets you do that. That's what I did last week, so.
Yeah. Okay, well, how do we end this? Go check out our Twitter at
LiteraryAFPod on Twitter, and our Gmail is literaryafpod@gmail.com.
Oh yeah, so if you have any like questions or like
comments, concerns,
if you drew a picture of like what you think I look like and it's really handsome, you can send that in.
Questions, if you want to send in any questions or comments, we were thinking about maybe doing like a mailbag at some point where we can read those off, answer questions.
Yeah, that'd be a fun episode.
Yeah.
And yeah, well, thank you for listening, and we'll catch you on the flip times.
What?